All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Lynn Dennand, and I'm Director for Academic Programs at Stanford Biodesign. And I have the honor and the privilege of leading tonight's event, honoring the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Krummel, as he prepares for his pseudo-retirement. However, I must confess that I am a little bit of an imposter here tonight. All of the hard work and careful planning that went into tonight's program was actually executed by Stacy McCutcheon, who is Stanford Biodesign's communication manager. And Stacy couldn't be with us tonight because she is on the beaches of Hawaii with her family, all 3 of her kids. But she did send us a video message to help kick off the evening and give us a little bit about the origin of how tonight's event was inspired.
When I joined Stanford Biodesign, one of the first things I noticed about Tom is that he's efficient. This is probably a good quality in a surgeon and an important skill for someone who has been known to take on as many as 3 jobs at once. It explains his fondness for aphorisms. They capture big lessons in very few words, why he uses 3 stir sticks in his coffee, and why his emails routinely lack punctuation, complete sentences, and most vowels. So when I went to hear Tom speak at a Fogarty Innovation lunch one day, I was surprised and delighted when he spent the entire hour telling engrossing stories about his life and career that weren't abbreviated at all. They were the perfect combination of engaging narrative and the kind of specific, descriptive details that ground a story and make it come alive. I pushed my sandwich aside and I took frantic notes, and I vowed to find a way to help capture and share these great stories sometime in the future. When I was given the chance to help develop this farewell event, a storytelling podcast and website called The Moth inspired a way to help put it all together. Stories have remarkable power. They connect people, they build empathy, understanding, and community. So tonight, in this community of colleagues and friends, not only will Tom tell a few stories, but some of the folks who have been closest to him professionally will share their stories of having worked with Tom and how it has changed them. While I'm sad to miss tonight's event, it was the only week I could gather all of my adult children for some family time. And I know Tom, who ranks family very high on his scale of important things, understands. Getting to know Tom better through these weeks of working on his stories has been a gift. It has been an honor and a privilege to help bring this program together.
All right, so as you have heard, we have an exciting night of fun stories ahead. And without further ado, I'd like to get going. Tom, it's super great to be here. I feel honored to be part of this special program with you.
Good.
So as you've seen on the invitation and on the programs that are around the event tonight, this is billed as a farewell to Tom Krummel. But we're not really getting rid of him. Right? Among other activities, Tom will be staying on as Senior Advisor to Stanford Biodesign and Chairman of the Board at Fogarty Innovation. And in fact, I'd argue it would actually be pretty hard to get rid of Tom, even if that's what we actually wanted to do. He brings a commitment and a dedication and a drive to everything he does that makes him a little bit hard to shake. And that's the theme of our first story, which is called All In. And so, Tom, I'm going to just hand right over to you.
Great. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm so grateful to have all of you here. It seemed like a wonderful opportunity to share some stories and have some laughs with you all, or y'all, as we say in Texas now, colleagues and many of my best friends. So again, I'm so grateful. Cheers. Many thanks to all the storytellers sitting in the front row. And to Annette and Mary, Lynn, Stacy, and Kathleen for their fantastic work. Any success of the program is theirs. Any screw-ups are mine. The storytelling format allowed me an interesting exercise that Steve Jobs used to talk about in terms of connecting the dots. So in his Stanford graduation address, which was a masterful one, Jobs famously said, "Life makes less sense going forward. You trust that the dots will eventually connect." When I was a kid in small-town Wisconsin, my parents continually emphasized to make the best and the most of the talents that you'd been given. In high school, the principal, Monsignor Wikowiak, ended every talk with the same simple phrase, aim high. I must have heard it 500 times. To me, there had to be a corollary between these two commentaries. If you're going to make the most of your talents, and if you're going to aim high, and if you're going to deliver, and who doesn't want to deliver, then in my mind, you really had to be all in, heart and soul. I evolved a framework as we went through surgery residency and faculty that I like to call the decathlon of life. Recall that in athletic terms, a decathlon is a 10-event track and field event, the ultimate test of an athlete's overall ability. The 100-yard dash to the mile, high jump, long jump, pole vault, shot put, discus, and a few others. In the end, you only compete with yourself. The score belongs to you. An essential concept of the decathlon is you have to do well in all events. If you scratch in one, you're out. And I think for me that makes sense in my personal and professional life. One of the other perverse things about the decathlon is that improvements in one event frequently lead to diminishing performance in the other. If you bulk up for the shot put, it's going to hurt you in the mile. Same in life. And professional success, but personal life failure happens to surgeons all the time. No thanks. To me, the decathlon is the perfect allegory for life. You have to succeed in every role, and you can't screw up in a single one. So what are the roles? My 10 life decathlon events have been human being, spouse, and parent, the base of and the core of my family and the people that I love. On the professional side, it's surgeon, innovator, teacher, leader, and manager. Those 8 cover personal and professional. That leaves 2, athlete and citizen of the world, and that rounds out how I think about where I spend my time and what matters to me and how I keep score. Any hope of progress or success across that spectrum means I gotta be all in all the time. What does all in look like? As a medical student a few years back, in the early heydays of cardiac surgery when there actually was some, I got totally jazzed about the field, replacing valves, sewing coronaries, all of which are a bit of an anachronism, and deciphering complex congenital heart lesions. I had a 2-week elective in cardiac surgery, and I did not leave the hospital for 14 days. Rinsed out my shorts in the sink, scrub suit, and it was a galvanizing experience to see the physiology, the anatomy, the patients, their problems, and how we tried to solve them. All in. There have been several 16-hour drives in snowstorms to get home for kids' birthday parties or important family events. All in at home as well. My personal ECMO experience is particularly illustrative. When I was a surgery resident, we fixed a congenital diaphragmatic hernia in a beautiful 7-pound newborn. Perfect operation. Pulled the guts out of the chest, sewed the diaphragm, closed the abdomen. Couldn't have been better. And then we agonizingly watched that kid die. Lung dysfunction because the underdeveloped lungs that had been compressed by the intestine wouldn't work. Total, awful, helpless feeling. Sitting on our hands, nothing to do. And that pissed me off. There had to be a better way, and today we'd call that an unmet need. It so happened, within 3 weeks of that child's death, that a young hotshot surgeon, Dr. Bob Bartlett, came to Richmond to give a surgical research talk on a newfangled treatment, ECMO. That's shorthand for bedside cardiopulmonary bypass. Peripheral cannulation in the neck, which enabled you to do it at the bedside, pumps, oxygenators, complex circuitry, blood-machine interfaces, 10 days to 2 weeks of continual cardiopulmonary bypass. Tricky stuff. It allowed us to support lung function until it could recover, and that was the promise. Bob was the first and only doc to be doing ECMO, and he reported his first success in a handful of babies including one with a diaphragmatic hernia, the same death that we had presided over. What were the chances? So after the talk, my mentor, Arnold Salzberg, elbows me in the ribs and say, how many more kids are we going to watch die? You've got to go learn ECMO. It so happened that I was just about to go into the lab for a whole year, so I had some flexibility. I reached out. Bob Bartlett invited me, this young surgery resident, to Irvine to observe a couple of ECMO cases. I spent 2 weeks at the bedside watching a crack team try to teach a young idiot how all this stuff works. Speaking of idiots, every night I'd read a new book that Bob Bartlett would bring me after discovering that I knew virtually nothing about most devices that we were using. Piezoelectric ceramics, blood surface interfaces, oxygenators, pumps. Who knew how roller pumps work, right? Heat exchangers. It was a crash course in biomedical engineering while at the same time being at the bedside taking care of desperately ill babies. I came back to Virginia and with the complete support of key mentors, which will be a theme here, resolved to start the world's second ECMO program. We ECMO perfused sheep for 2 weeks in the lab. We called them all Wooly Nelson. You can guess who took care of the sheep every night. We built a team, 2 dog lab technicians and a neonatal nurse, my wife Susie. We convinced senior neonatologists that we weren't going to be assassins. And besides, we had figured out the predictive mortality stats in our NICU, and we were only going to try in patients that had a complete agreement on 100% mortality, truly resuscitating the dead. No hospital administrators had the slightest clue about what we were preparing to do. No IRB. Fast forward, this ragtag team of dog lab technicians and surgery trainees and my long-suffering but wonderful wife, Susie, rescued 6 babies in a row, all of whom had been predicted 100% mortality. I seldom left the bedside and never left the hospital, 10 days to 2 weeks at a crack. All of those 6 kids are alive today. In the nurturing surgical environment of the time, my boss said, Bartlett proved ECMO could be done. Krummel proved anybody could do ECMO. We were flying high, and then 3 kids in a row died. Total failures. Think about that. If that order had been reversed and we had the 3 deaths first, I'd still be bagging groceries at Safeway. As a senior colleague later said to me, Tom, the good Lord looks out after drunks, ne'er-do-wells, and young surgeons. I simply nodded. I wasn't sure which group he thought I fit in. The demonstration point had been made. ECMO had life-saving potential. Other children's hospitals followed. There are now more than 150 ECMO programs around the country and 40,000 ECMO survivors. Story illustrates three themes to close. 1, the importance of paying it forward. Without Bob Bartlett and Arnie Salzberg encouraging, cajoling, and occasionally kicking me in the ass, ECMO might not have ever happened. Secondly, failure happens. We had 3, I'll still remember those 3 kids dying. Failure happens especially in new ventures. If it's a pizza delivery app, who cares, right? If it's a new medical technology, pertinent to everyone in the audience, failure can be crushing. And most importantly, in all new medical technologies, and for all of you, in anything else that really matters, your only strategy and your best chance is to go all in. Thank you.
All right, so Tom, another identity on your decathlon was athlete. And many folks know here you're an avid biker, but not everybody, speaking of all in, not everybody knows that for one of your very first long distance bike rides, you decided to go all the way from Santa Barbara, California to outside of Charlotte, South Carolina. And
Charleston.
Charleston,
yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes, all right.
And I just have to know, what were you thinking?
I wasn't. You know, it's a big country. And what we fly over in 5 hours, we rode in 40 days, 100 miles a day, back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And it was, you know, I had turned 61. had a knee replaced was feeling old and fat and worthless. And so having a goal like that, some people find aggravating. I found it invigorating, and was a good event. And I'll talk a little, because that was preceded with a little failure event that we'll talk about in the F word.
All right, coming up. But now I'd like to invite Paul Yock, founder and director emeritus of Stanford Biodesign, to the stage. While Paul comes up, I'll note that Paul and Tom have been friends and colleagues for a lot of years now. And some people might even consider them like peanut butter and chocolate, two great tastes that go great together. But for this story, I want to take you back to a time when they were first getting to know each other, and they might have actually ended up being competitors of sorts in the health technology innovation space. But spoiler alert, the story has a happy ending, which is why it's called Stronger Together. And I'll hand over to you, Paul.
Well, this story goes back to the last century, 1999. I just wanted it to sound historically significant, you know. Late in the last century, I got an email from Tom Krummel, surgeon, and it said, I've just been selected to be the new chair of surgery at Stanford, and I have an interest in medical technology innovation, and somebody said we should get together. So this was before biodesign was biodesign. We had something called the Medical Device Network.
MDN, that's right.
And in the spirit of networking, I thought, well, this sounds like I should meet with Dr. Krummel. I had a little bit of anxiety about that, to be honest. I looked him up on the web, and you heard a little bit about the history of, you know, pioneering ECMO. So not only that, he clearly had incredible career chops. He rose in his career through the ranks at a blistering pace, and got picked to be chair of surgery at Stanford. So, and that was layered onto a certain unease I grew up to have with surgeons. So some of you know this, but not all surgeons are as meek and gentle as Dr. Fogarty. So I had some anticipation about this meeting. We decided to have breakfast at the Stanford Park. And I have a very clear memory about this. I got there a little bit early. I sat at a window table looking at the check-in area. And in walks this guy who has to be Tom Krummel, right? I mean, vigorous, walks up to the table, you know, booming voice, firm handshake. Hi, call me Tom. And I thought, yeah, this is kind of what I was expecting. And then a funny thing happened over the next hour, which was Tom asked me a bunch of questions about Stanford, about the Medical Device Network, about me. And he really listened. And he asked more questions. And by the end of that, he had come in saying, call me Tom. And by the end of that, I actually felt like I could call him Tom. This was a good guy. So that was the good news. Bad news that it was clear that there was a new sheriff in town. And he did indeed want to build an innovation program. And I got worried, honestly, about the fact that there might, Dodge might not be big enough for the two programs. So it came to a head when I finally succeeded, and we transitioned to biodesign, we started fellowship. I finally got a development person, fundraising person, part of a person to work with us in biodesign. And I explained what we're trying to do. And she said, my colleague works with the Department of Surgery, and they're doing something that sounds an awful lot like what you're doing. So help me understand how to pitch this. And I thought, oh, damn. That's true. We've got trouble here. And I worried about that for a couple of weeks, and then I went to see Tom to talk about it. That conversation undoubtedly started with Tom saying, "How's your family?" But after that, he kind of digested what the issue was, and he said, there's no reason we have to think about this as competitive. We'll do a lot better if we get together. We'll be stronger together working on this. So let's think through this. What are the things to do? Well, one thing to do was to put a surgeon into the fellowship program, which we did, and turns out that that was a big success, and we had a chain of surgeons over the next years that were fantastic. Folks that have gone on to distinguished careers in different branches of surgery, including, by the way, our current fellowship directors who Tom sourced, put into the program, groomed, were fellows, Dan Azaguri and James Wall, who many of you know. He had some other ideas. He said, 1 year is okay for the Biodesign Fellowship, but really for the surgeons, we need to have a second year because they need to continue to work on their projects, but they also need to groom their careers. This is not a pathway that's been established before, the surgeon innovator pathway. There were a few great examples. We have a few sitting here tonight. But in general, that wasn't a recognized pathway, and these young innovators needed some time to get their careers together. Tom became the co-director of Biodesign, and just to cut the story short, his fingerprints are on every major good decision that we made as we went along. And there are a few things that he did where he was singularly responsible for what happened. And that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. So Tom is singularly responsible for seeing that there could be an important connection between the Fogarty Institute and Biodesign. He saw this way before the rest of us, and he kind of nudged me into that idea and went out and got Andrew Cleeland and put us together and got us working on this program. You may not have heard much about the Biodesign Fogarty Innovation Alliance. We're doing that on purpose. We're keeping it kind of quiet as we build the program, get going. So stay tuned. It's off and running, and it's in good shape over there, but as I say, stay tuned, we'll tell you more. Two other things quick. One is, to me personally, and most importantly, is we have developed a good friendship. This wasn't necessarily in the cards, so Tom's from Wisconsin, I'm from Minnesota. There is an intrinsic rivalry built into that. The Gophers and the Badgers, don't get along so well. But we realized, I think, out here that we were both aliens in Lotus Land. And so that Midwest connection turned out to be a real bond. And I learned a tremendous amount from Tom, not just about Stanford and about politics, but about the rest of life. And I learned, for example, that you do always try to ask, how's the family? And you mean it, and you listen to what the answer is. So one last thing. I think I saw Jeff Gertner here. I think Mary Hahn is here too. I hope that you both would say that this partnership, this getting us stronger together, has been good for surgery as well. So surgery now has a very powerful surgical innovation program. We have terrific cross-pollination between surgery and Biodesign. It's a legacy that we want to build on. And so I'm very happy to announce this afternoon that there's a new fund, a new endowment being created. That's called the Tom Krummel Biodesign Surgical Innovation Fund. And as of this afternoon, Tom, we have $351,000 in that fund. This is the part where I say, if you want to contribute more to the fund, please see me or Josh or Mary or Jeff Gertner. But I think it's the perfect way to honor Tom's legacy in having the vision to understand how to combine surgery and biodesign. It's become a model for everything that we've done in biodesign moving forward. And this endowment will be a way of consolidating the fact that we're stronger together. So Tom, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Yeah.
Aren't stories fun? Yeah. All right, so as we transition to our next story, as I'll note again that Silicon Valley is sort of famous for celebrating exciting, big, even audacious successes, right? But Tom asked us to do something a little bit different tonight. In fact, I hope I don't offend anyone when I say that he actually asked us to use the F word tonight. So instead of focusing exclusively, as you heard a little bit in the first story, on all the things that have gone right in Tom's career, we're going to talk a little bit more about failures and the lessons that he has taken away and have helped shape him. In fact, Tom is a little bit famous for doing this when he goes to these invited talks and receives these awards and accolades, that he often forgoes the showboating around all the things that he's done right in favor of sharing these lessons, paying them forward to help bring up the next generation of folks who can follow in those footsteps, which certainly speaks to his humility. So Tom, we are ready for you to unleash the F word.
All right, good. Well, again, my thanks to Paul. I think one of my dearest friends and colleagues, sort of cellmates in biodesign, and couldn't have been a more wonderful 22 years. So thank you, my friend. Indeed, Silicon Valley and the world is just giddy about success. One breathless blurb after another. Tweet this, echo chambers for success. Ain't it all grand, right? And failure is unmentioned, ignored, or shunned. And I was startled at the recent Tokyo Olympics. We had silver medalists, world silver medalists, apologizing for their failure, like, I want to say, WTF. Unfortunately, this preoccupation with success sends an awful message to the next generation. They're led to believe that all of the senior crew in this audience effortlessly waltz through their careers just clinking champagne glasses and ain't it great, one thing after another. The next generation has been truly hoodwinked into believing that any bump on their road is game over. All the veteran operators in the audience tonight totally understand this to be complete BS. So why doesn't anybody talk about the F word, failure? Why? The problem is that failure doesn't sell well. Let me give you 3 examples. Headlines, side by side. Stunning IPO valued at $5 billion. Or startup XYZ closes. Okay, I know what I'm reading. Discovery promises new cancer cure. Or another failed experiment. Early successes in clinical study lead to life-saving therapy, or Krummel screws up again. You get it. The problem is the coin of life has those 2 sides. And I think it's so important, especially for the young people that are in this echo chamber, to hear that from the battle-hardened veterans that have seen both sides of it. And we talked about that in the ECMO story. I mean, You know, I got to tell you, that had a profound impact on me. So I want to offer two thoughts about the F word and a couple of personal examples of failure. First thought, failure happens. Own it, remember it, and learn from it. And thought two, existing failures in our current patient care inform future opportunities. So gravitate towards it, and we'll elaborate briefly on each. Failure happens. Okay? Michael Jordan, truly the greatest ever, is lionized for his 6 NBA rings, says this in a classic 30-second video. Quote, "In my pro career, I've missed more than 9,000 shots. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I was trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again, and yet that is why I succeed." That from the greatest ever. My scorecard in a 35-year surgical career. I've probably taken care of around 10,000 kids. So let's do the math. A 1% failure rate, that's 100 kids with problems. 2%, 200. For the record, 5% would be considered world-class performance. So we've had more than a few lumps, bumps, and failures. Some simple, recoverable, others not so simple, or worse. My burden. I do remember their names and their faces in those that we should have done better. And that, of course, becomes experience. That said, I've never been sued. Why? I think it's because I owned each and every one of the complications, the problems, and the failures, owned it in the biggest possible way, and did everything possible to recover. There's a great book about surgical tradition of reflection, discussion, and ownership of failure, which is embodied in our weekly morbidity and mortality conferences. The book is entitled Forgive and Remember, and Leslie and I shared that in the course of a couple of our discussions. It's a marvelous treatise about how to think about failure in the clinical, full-contact sport world of surgery, dealing with the things that work and the things that don't work. Short takeaway, failures do happen. Own them. Remember them. Learn from them, yours and others. Try not to repeat. On the MedTech startup side, in the last 6 months, I've had 3 startups in my personal portfolio go belly up. All had attributes of success, important unmet clinical needs, breakthrough technologies, terrific people. Each failure had its reason, but in the course of things, we pissed away 5 years and millions of dollars, all in the scrap heap. Much to remember, much to learn. On a personal note, before I tackled the ride across America, I failed miserably at the California death ride. Fred St. Gore in the audience, I think, has done the death ride a couple times, so hats off to you, Fred. Unprepared and unfit for a one-day, 125-mile ride in the Sierras, I abandoned halfway through, tail between my legs, exhausted, humbled, and pissed. Vowed to prepare to do better. And that failure really laid the groundwork for the cross-country cycling adventure that you see a few pictures of around here. Winston Churchill knew something about failure, put it this way: success is not final, and failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. So, punchline point 1, don't be surprised by failure, own it. When you can, fix it, remember it, forgive it, learn, and keep going. Point number 2, existing failures are ripe opportunities to innovate. I think the time-proven biodesign process of defining the unmet clinical need could be rephrased as our biggest current failings and screw-ups, if they're reliably repeatable, are an opportunity for innovation. Famous case in point. Tom Fogarty was a young scrub tech working with Jack Cranley and made a simple observation. Patients with emboli, blood clots in their lower extremities, were subjected to a massive operation. An incision was made from the groin to the knee, sometimes further. The femoral artery was opened. The surgeons in the audience will go, what the hell did they do? But they did. Long arteriotomy and inadequate clot extraction, picking stuff out. And then Tom was watching from the scrub table and made a simple observation. Most of these patients came back for an amputation. Fogarty says, well, that operation must not be very good. And he was assured by the experts that this was a great operation, but he knew otherwise. His identification of that point of failure in clot extraction paved the way for the entire field of endoluminal therapy with the first, but not the last, balloon catheter. The rest is history, and we're here at Fogarty Innovation tonight to remember that legacy, to remember that he was trying to solve problems, not gravitating towards the thing that worked. So, don't be afraid of the F word. It ain't all bad. Recognize it as an opportunity for what it can be. And especially for the young people, I hope this little ramble just sort of helps you reset the way you think about your problems. When I was a kid, I put myself through college as a janitor, and there was a sign in one of the offices I cleaned, and it said, be grateful for your problems, it's what we pay you for. It made sense to me then and makes sense to me now. Lynn, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Tom, I know there was one scenario at least though where failure wasn't an option. At the time, you were chairman of the board for Fogarty Innovation, and you were also acting CEO. And when it was time to launch the search, I know you were personally and very highly motivated to make sure that was a success. So let's invite that success to the stage. Andrew Cleeland, please join us.
All right.
And
one of my best recruits.
Andrew, the name of your story tonight is a famous Tomism, never better. So please take it away.
It is, never better. I was actually very surprised I wasn't assigned the F word.
We debated that actually in the pre-calls.
And I think that would have been a little bit of, what is that called? When you, anti-Australianism. So Tom, I'm honored to be up here, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to tell a story. I really appreciate it, and that's why I'm hiding behind this podium. I spent a long 5 minutes last night on our board call writing this, so I want to do it justice. So you're probably going to see, folks, that I'm going to read a lot, so I apologize. So it is, never better, as told by me. Can the full measure of a man like Tom, be captured in a few words? Well, I think the title of today's stories, All In, Stronger Together, Never Better, and the ones to follow might just come close. So what do you guys think? Tom is a unique man. He's touched all of us here in profound and impactful ways. And just to be clear to you Stanford folks here, I don't mean any inappropriate ways. He is the essence of a strong, compassionate leader. Every one of us in this room tonight has heard Tom respond to the common greetings, how's things or how's your day, with an uncommon trademarked response, never better. To their detriment, most will assign little mind to it. If you don't know the backstory and how it truly reflects Tom's spirit and outlook on life, you're missing out. So I had the pleasure of hearing the story one day when Tom was debriefing me on my many shortcomings following a board meeting. I remember he is, as has been told tonight, he is chairman of the board of Fogarty, which I think is another term that really accurately captures Tom, chairman of the board. So the story goes a little like this. He's in his 9th year of surgical training, 2 months from finishing. He's been up all night for 3 nights in a row. Around the corner barrels the big boss, the big guy, who is clearly steaming. Apparently one of the docs Tom was supervising had done something to piss off the big boy. He then proceeds to light into Tom, chewing him out to the max, including the classic line, "You are the dumbest person who has ever come through the program." As Tom described it to me, it was a very public shit show. Afterwards, one of the other docs who'd witnessed the tirade came up to Tom. "Geez, are you okay?" His response, I guess you can tell, "Never better." He explained to me that it meant don't let some prick ruin your day. The professional way in which you present yourself, or most importantly, your own sense of self and self-worth. And doesn't it capture his character perfectly? His integrity, his leadership, his professionalism, his centeredness, and his fuck you attitude. I've fully embraced Tom's never better. Its spirit, its meaning, and its brevity appeal to my core. And this next quote, I got a fright a couple of seconds ago because he hasn't seen this. Winston Churchill once said, "Attitude is a little thing that makes a great difference. Never better is the attitude I want to embody." Just last week, I had one of those moments, you know, those times when everything seems to go sideways and you're severely tested. We all have them, but unfortunately, I seem to attract them. So here's the scene, and a lot of you are going to relate to this. We've been trying to close a financing for one of our companies, and a late addition to the opposing team is making a nuisance of himself. There's been a lot of calls, a lot of back and forth, and this is still pending as I leave for my first vacation with my family since the beginning of COVID. So now it's 5 a.m. in the morning. My family's asleep in a hotel room. I'm sitting on the balcony looking out over the South Pacific Ocean and listening on Zoom to this dickhead lawyer trying his best to kill 6 months of hard work with an absurd and irrelevant issue. While I must admit I did use a few choice words under my breath, hopefully unheard of by the parties on the Zoom, I summoned my inner Tom, hold my temper, suppress my frustration, and counter his arguments firmly and persuasively. As I said, remember I wrote this. Call over, and I'm sitting there fuming, swearing to the Hawaiian gods, when I sensed the balcony door quietly slide open. A sleepy-eyed Jordan, who was just sitting just here, who I had apparently woken. And as you know, no teenager is up at 6 a.m. unless they have a reason. Was looking at me, turned around and she's looking at me. "You okay, Dad?" "Never better, little one." So never better is only one of the many things Tom's taught me. I want to take this moment to sincerely thank you for your leadership, your mentorship, and most importantly, your friendship. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that said, I do think I can improve your classic. I really do.
The Australian version.
Yeah, maybe add a little Australian touch to it. So how about never bloody better? And just for you guys, it wasn't never bloody better before. It didn't get edited, I took it out. So with my last act up here tonight, I want an answer from you all. How are you all doing tonight?
Never better.
Come on,
Never
that's it. That was a little bit weak. How about one more time? How are you guys doing tonight?
Never better.
All right, excellent.
Good job, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to keep moving.
Yeah, right. I was just going to say really quickly, sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say, we were supposed to be inside tonight. Obviously, for obvious reasons, we couldn't be out here. But I just want to thank Mary, Annette, Kathleen, and all the others for doing this work to be able to make this a fantastic night to be getting out here. And tell you what, guys, you improvised, and you improvised well. You did startups proud. Thank you.
Awesome job.
Stealing a little of our thunder from the closing remarks, but that's totally fine. All right, so the title of our next story is a little less self-explanatory. It's called Clydesdale. I'm assuming this is not a commercial for Budweiser beer, but I'm also a little uncertain what giant draft horses have in common with medtech innovators, but I'm just going to turn it straight to Tom to enlighten us.
So hang with me on this one for a minute or two. In 1998, I had a great job as chair of surgery at Penn State in bucolic Hershey, Pennsylvania. Our kids were settled, thriving, and soon to start high school. Skids were greased, house was almost paid off. I was slotted to become the next dean, vice chancellor for health sciences. Sweet setup, comfortable. But I've actually never liked being comfortable, and Silicon Valley was blowing up. What are the chances that I got a call? Would I look at the chairmanship of a messy Department of Surgery at Stanford University? Not just a fixer-upper, a shambles. That was one of those jobs that it was a riddle that, maybe could be solved, but a lot of people had sort of died trying. And I was persuaded reluctantly to take a look at it. So I hopped on the plane, spent 36 hours on the Stanford campus, blown away by the possibilities. Just like my medical student experience in cardiac surgery. I felt like I gotta see if this is possible, and I'd rather fail at it than wonder forever what might have been. During my third and final visit, then Dean Bauer, who Paul will remember, challenged me. He said, Krummel, write me a 50-page paper on what you're gonna do to fix the Department of Surgery. And I blurted out, Dean Bauer, I'll tell you everything you need to know right now in 50 words. I don't need 50 pages. You don't go to the Kentucky Derby with Clydesdales. Stanford's number 38th ranked Department of Surgery needs racehorses, not Clydesdales, and I'm prepared to try to build that organization. Less than 50 words. Bauer was all in, and I was scared to death. Like, what have I just decided to undertake? As I like to say, the dog had caught the car it was chasing. Over the 16 years at the helm of the department, I recruited more than 100 thoroughbred racehorses. The department has prospered and is now an easy top 5 department in the country. The only department of surgery in the country that could lose $5 million a year became wildly successful and seriously profitable. Not only that, there are other pieces in a clinical department of surgery. Research funding increased 5x, 500%, in large part because of one particular racehorse that I recruited, Mike Longacre, and the other racehorses that he recruited, including Jeff Gertner. Our residencies are now chock-a-block full of, you guessed it, racehorses in training. Racehorse wannabes. And my successor, Mary Hahn, who's here, has further enhanced that trajectory. Mary, kudos. Important note, as the father of 3 daughters, I wanted them to get a fair shake in the world. Nothing more, but nothing less. And I knew I had my part to do. When I arrived, Stanford surgery faculty was 9% women and no role models for surgical residents. When I finished, 42% women on the faculty. I started and ran our unconscious bias program for the department. About 10 years ago, 5 of the 6 finishing chief residents in the Department of Surgery were women. We had a token male. Perhaps those efforts foretold our diversity by doing programs at Biodesign and Fogarty. Finally, in my Biodesign partnership with Paul and at Fogarty Innovation with my partnership with the board, we have recruited well. Students, trainees, young faculty, leadership, every one of them a racehorse. Paul was kind enough to point out that I had a non-trivial hand in recruiting next generation leadership, both at Biodesign and at Fogarty. Andrew has indeed been a marvelous and creative CEO, and part of what you see here wouldn't be here without Andrew. And Josh, who's going to talk next a little about the search process, will be a splendid next Biodesign director. Both racehorses. So remember, if you want to haul a beer wagon, bring Clydesdales. You go into the Derby, get racehorses.
All right, speaking of, let's get the next racehorse up here. Josh is going to provide us with a glimpse of what it's like to be on the other side of the equation when Tom is at the helm of a search. And his story is called The Angler's Slow Reel. I should clarify, though, that Tom himself is not a fisherman, but he is pretty well known for the saying, if you give an innovator a fish, they'll eat for a day. If you teach an innovator to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. So beyond that, we'll turn to Josh to muse further on Tom as theoretical fisherman.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Tom, for everything you've done for all of us, seriously. Yeah, I thought actually Tom was a fisherman because he uses so many fisherman analogies. So that's what made me think of this particular analogy, which relates to the biodesign director search, which I obviously had some small part in at least as the target. When Tom first volunteered to lead the search, I think we were all hugely thrilled because we knew that Tom understood the fundamental principles, the values, the vision of what we were all trying to do at Biodesign, and we thought that the search would be well in hand. That said, we, collectively said, well, how should we make sure that this person, whoever is chosen, is, going to serve this community, which is so diverse? So we set upon a plan to have basically probably one of the most rigorous interview processes with multiple layers of interviews and people from all sectors of our very important community play a role in having some input. And I thought that, I was part of some of these discussions. I thought this was a great idea. It was so precious to all of us how whomever would take this role. Little did I know that I would wind up being subjected to this process myself. But that's what happened. And all along the way, Tom would come and meet with me in my office, and I would be excited to meet with him because I'd think, I'm going to find out who's going to be who are the candidates and stuff like that. But true to Tom's, classic integrity and form, never actually revealed to me any of those candidates. And we would just talk about characteristics and possibilities. And then he always at the end of the conversation say, Josh, if you ever yourself had an interest, you just let me know, okay? And I would be like, oh, thank you. That's, I would like to, but, I just started this new job at NEA and I want to give this a chance. And, it would be inappropriate for me to just do this and then leave. And, the search continued, and it's over time, and we met over the course of many months occasionally. And Tom would come by, and we would have this talk. And each time I would be thinking, now I'm gonna, know who is it? And again, he would leave, never knowing. I would never know who it was, till finally one time I saw him on my calendar, and it was around the time I had been at NEA for several years at this point. And I was really trying to think about what's next for me. For those that are in the venture business here, you can probably relate to this. There's people that are fit for the venture business, and then there are those that it just isn't their calling. And for me, the opportunity to go to venture was to try to make an impact, to do something, to have the ability to have the purse strings in the hands to be able to put money behind things that meant something and that were significant clinically. And unfortunately, and this is no negative comment about NEA in particular, but just the criteria, the thresholds, I found myself saying no so much more often than saying yes. And I'm just not a no person. I'm a yes, how do we do it person, not a no person. So I found myself really in this sort of dilemma where I, sort of arrived at this great firm, and they are a great firm and great people, but just finding a lack of connection for myself with the day-to-day operations of 98% no and maybe 1 or 2% yes, it's just not sitting well with me. And there's Tom, showing up, and I should have heard all along the slow click of the very experienced angler's reel through all those meetings, I went fishing with my son, and I sort of got a sense of like what this is all about. You slowly move, you don't pull fast, don't pull it, just a little bit at a time until the fish gets just close enough to be in. And so, I said to Tom, assuming I am interested, is there a way that I can, sort of drop in at the right moment? I mean, I don't want to put my name out there and then have my companies wonder what my commitment to them is, and my colleagues and so on. There's so much, so much I need to insert myself in this thing, and it would be pretty damaging if this all got on. He said, we can do it, but obviously, no guarantees. Big process ahead, but I'll tell you when the moment is, and then you can go through the full process, and we'll see what happens. And that moment came, and I dropped my hat into the ring, here I am. Here I am. Thanks. But I just want to, thank Tom for giving me this opportunity. It's, I think we all are here, all those here in Fogarty Innovation, all those folks associated with Biodesign, and appreciating the contribution that Tom has made to all of us and to, to the patients. It's the thing I realized when I was in medical school, and it was sort of a shocking reality. I came to this realization is that, and this is no disrespect for the medical people around the room, but medical people, they sort of modify disease, and surgeons actually cure people. And Tom, you cured us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, we are closing in on it, people. But as Tom mentioned in the Clydesdale story, it's not just about bringing in the right talent. It's also about bringing up that talent to realize full potential in the organization. So I'm happy to invite Carla Pugh to the stage to join us. Carla is professor of surgery with the Stanford School of Medicine, and she will share her perspective on being mentored by Tom. But I have an exciting announcement as Carla joins us that she is the inaugural designee for the Thomas M. Krummel Chair, with her appointment to be confirmed in the fall after Tom's official retirement. And I have to note that this chair is very unique in that it represents a collaboration between Stanford Healthcare, Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, and the Stanford School of Medicine. And as I understand it, getting those three organizations to agree, let alone collaborate on something like this is no small feat. So it's huge congratulations to both Tom and to Carla. And Carla is going to share a story with us focused on becoming the holistic leader.
Thank you. I'll share my ending in the beginning, and I have to say that it's unfathomable, it's surreal to have learned that I will be the inaugural Tom Krummel Professor of Surgery. Really big shoes to fill.
Piece of cake.
Oh, no way.
Piece of cake.
I'm a realist, okay? So I know that if I'm able to achieve at least 1/4 of what he has accomplished, I will be wildly successful, okay? And I think that just everything that you've heard really embodies the holistic leader that he is. All of the stories that you've told, the stories that he has given us, his secret sauce, we know what framework the man stands on. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. And so we've got a lot more to learn, and I look forward to that. My first story is actually a prequel to the Clydesdales. So I was a graduate student. I finished my surgery residency, and I was a graduate student here at Stanford in 1997, the end of 97, well before Tom arrived. And I distinctly remember the hum in the hallways of the School of Medicine when it was announced that Tom was going to be the new chair of surgery. Most of the hum were actually bets that he wouldn't last more than 2 years. And I'm new here, I'm a grad student, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like juicy in the hallway, right? I'm like, so I can't wait to meet him and like see how this plays out. So Tom comes and he gives his first State of the Union address of the department, and in his usual fashion, he comes and he's, very confident, and he shares his agenda and the plan for, this speech and the talk. And then once he sets the stage and the tone, he pauses and he says, I knew this job would be challenging, and I was up for the task. But what I didn't know is that the chair of surgery looked like this. And he flashes on the screen this picture of this very ornate king's chair. It had to be like the king's chair from Alice in Wonderland. It was just like really ornate. But the velvet seat cushion was engulfed in flames. And everyone in the audience was, just cracked up laughing when he showed the slide. Part of the laughter was because it was just funny in that moment in the State of the Union address. The other part of the laughter was actually sort of this calming realization that he knew what he was getting into, and he was still here. And that, in and of itself, really sort of sealed the deal for the people in the department to feel confident that he was really going to fight for this department, and many of them already knew just based on his address alone that he was going to succeed. I can say, when you think about a holistic leader, they do exactly that. He served a perfect cocktail that was full of confidence, full of courage, full of strength, and had a smidgen of humility and vulnerability. And that sealed the deal for people to trust him and make a commitment to partnering with him. And here we are. My second story relates to our mentee-mentor relationship. So as I said, I was a graduate student. I just finished my surgical residency. I started my PhD. I just finished a meeting with one of my research advisors, and she says, well, the new chair has an interest in technology and innovation, and that was my interest in getting the PhD in the first place. And she says, you should ask him if he would be one of your thesis advisors. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I know first what's going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is I'm never going to be able to get an appointment with him. Like, what admin would give some grad student, from the outside an appointment with Tom Krummel? And then I'm like, the second thing, he's busy putting out that fire. Like, what time would he have for me? And I tell you, not only did I get an appointment, I met with Tom, and he said yes. Game on. He then proceeded in another holistic fashion, not only to partner with me in my ask, but he gave me more than what I ever dreamed of or even knew to ask. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience. You come to him, you've got this great idea, and you ask him to help you, and then he gives you more than what you ever have dreamed of. He's helped with everything. Every dream that I've had, every step along the way helped me negotiate, frame my mind around my first job after I finished grad school at Stanford, my second job, all the above, my dreams and aspirations as a surgeon. And again, I stand here in complete disbelief, humbled, extremely honored to even be associated with this great person, and to have a professorship in his name is the story, just for my story, is more than perfect, and so I'm very honored. One of my favorite Tomisms, if you see a turtle on a high post, he didn't get there by himself. And that has double meaning, and it's always funny, and every time he says it, I listen to the story and I listen to the context, and I always learn something new, and so I had to sort of share that. But thank you, Tom, for your example.
Thank you.
Thank you for your support. Thank you for paying it forward for the generations behind you, and thank you for being you. I feel like this is one of those moments where I should throw like a really expensive champagne glass at a fireplace or something. Anyway, I won't do it.
Nice.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So We're getting there, guys, but we have one more special speaker that we want to bring to the stage. Rodney Perkins, who's making his way up. If there was a mountain, his face would be there larger than life if MedTech had its own Mount Rushmore. And Rodney and Tom have been friends and colleagues for over 20 years. And Dr. Perkins has a few special closing remarks for us.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me here to talk about Tom, one of my favorite subjects. I met Tom some time ago when he first came here. He came over to the California Institute at Stanford, which was a few yards away from the hospital.
801 Welch Road.
801 Welch Road, and introduced himself. And I thought, having known the previous chairs of surgery, this guy is different. He is energetic. He's wanting to do something. He's coming to see me, who is a townie rather than a gownie, and I thought that was unusual. And ever since then, I think we've had a wonderful relationship, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I thought, in doing this, what would we talk about his contributions? What are his contributions? We've heard many of them here. And if you look back, you would say, well, turning around the surgery department at Stanford, as he said, it was underwater, it was weak, it had all these problems, and he turned that around very rapidly. What do we have ever since the stats you gave? 8 chairs of surgery.
Yeah, 8 endowed chairs.
Endowed chairs, and turned it around financially. Had training over 100 surgeons now, etc. You could say that was the greatest contribution. Certainly to Stanford it was. But it doesn't stop there. It just keeps going on. If you look at it beyond Stanford, what other organizations has he contributed to? He not only was here, but he went out into the community, was involved in other startup companies as a director or a consultant or principal. So he saw the other side of the world and that side of innovation. And also, if we look at it from the standpoint of his trips to France, which he loves that, I think he sleeps in a yellow jersey over there because he likes cycling so much. But he is an ambassador of Stanford in surgery in the world. And this organization in Strasbourg, which is a very high-tech, innovative to put technology into surgery around the world, he's worked with them very closely, and I think he's enhanced their organization tremendously. And he has also, by his presence there, been an ambassador, and really, I think we should be proud of him from what he's done for Stanford internationally and domestically. So, and this is another thing that I don't know if you know or not, but he's a hydro engineer, right? He not only that, he was on the board of Cal Water, and I never have been able to figure out how that came about. But I have to say that I was surprised to find out he was chairman of the compensation committee.
I am.
Now, the compensation committee is a very difficult job, actually. And it is very...
We like to say when you take over the comp committee, you're issued a T-shirt with a bullseye on the chest.
Yeah. And everybody on the board is hoping that you don't ask. They don't ask you, yeah. Uh-huh. So, but that was easy for him, because being on the comp committee, what could be better training than annually talking to 120 surgeons and setting their salaries and everything of the biggest egotists in the world, or the wannabe biggest egotists in the world. And so I have to say, too, I've seen him in action at Procept, which is a company that we're on the board, and Tom was one of the first board members I wanted to bring on because I recognized his love of new things and everything, and he has been a superb, very fair-minded chairman of the comp committee and done an excellent job there. So I think all of these things are part of what makes Tom. But there's another thing that I think is very important is what does he not give just to organizations, but such as the Fogarty organization. I think he's done a tremendous job of getting it even better organized, getting Andrew on board, being the spearhead of raising money for the organization, et cetera. And this is a very worthwhile cause to try to put more innovation in surgery, because by doing that, we will help a lot of people. And then I think also one other thing that is important is what has he given to each of us? These organizational things, it's true, a lot. But when we think about it, and I think of Tom as coming here, and we all are on our own paths, and our life paths intertwine, sometimes for 10 years, sometimes for 3 years, sometimes for a long time. But I think one of the best things that Tom gives to each individual is to have an opportunity where your paths cross, as his and mine has in the last 15 years or so, and have a chance to walk the path for a while with Tom. And you can see his energy, his can-do, and it wears off on you. And you can see his ability to grasp a really knotty problem quickly, dissect it, and put some solutions into place or research the potential solutions. I've seen that a number of times. And then also, I think his empathy for others is a very important thing to have in healthcare or any endeavor, and he has plenty of that. But probably the best thing that comes from this walk down the same path is a warm friendship. And if you have a friend of Tom, you really think of him as a friend. And I've learned to do that over the years. And Tom, I want to thank you for all you've done for each of us, for the organizations, and for being Tom Krummel.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank Susie.
Please.
Because all the times that she has been there alone, raising 3 children, all it takes to be behind somebody in this kind of position is a lot of work and a lot of strife. And I would like to thank her also for her contribution. And so, Tom, I will say this. We love you. We are so happy for you shifting gears, and I think that's typical. It's what's next, folks. And Texas is so fortunate to have you down there, and look out UT.
There you go.
And we will miss you, and we hope you will visit us frequently.
That's the plan. That's the plan. Rodney, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Perkins. All right, so we are at time, so I'm going to spare you guys my own story of Tom, but I want to we met through the writing of the biodesign textbook. And then sometime after the first edition was done, I was coming over full-time to biodesign. And I think you said something to the effect of me like, oh, you're gonna do great things over here. And I was like, well, if Tom thinks so. So Tom, for me, has always been, one part cheerleader and just this huge source of, he builds my confidence. And so thank you, Tom, for all that you do. That wraps the formal program. I do want to echo the thanks, and again, thanks Stacy McCutcheon for developing the program tonight. Annette Iwanich, Kathleen Sochin, Carolyn Heller, Howard Bob, and Mary Gorman. Of course, thank you so much for putting the rest of the event together. And this trip worked out perfectly, maybe even better than inside, right?
Yeah.
So there's still wonderful wine and food and more time to stick around on the program. And I want to just remind everybody that there is a storyteller in each of us, and I hope that you'll use some of this remaining time to maybe share your story, your favorite story about Tom with a friend, or maybe a story about anyone of this wonderful community. We're so fortunate that this community is unparalleled, and so Tom, you're a huge part of that. Thank you for shaping this community. Thank you all for being here to honor this wonderful person.
Good. Thank you all. Thanks so much.